Good morning. This is Debra V. Wilson. It is the 6th of July, 2018. It's Friday. The time is 900 hours and 53 minutes. That's GMT minus 6, and I am in Canada. This podcast will be a brief one because it's a preliminary podcast I'm doing around issues of understanding your identity and how your understanding of your identities, we all have multiple identities, and how you experience those identities, those intersecting identities, impacts the way in which you experience and how you understand what you are experiencing. The context will be the Pride Parade. I'm going to look at two Pride Parades, the Pride Parade that's already occurred in Toronto and the one that's happening in London, England, tomorrow, Saturday, the 7th of July, 2018. I think if you follow any conversation about Pride Parades in general, there's a conversation about inclusiveness and an understanding just because, quote unquote, everyone is queer, or the people who are queer allies, they experience their queerness the same way. In addition, there is discussion around the way in which the parade understands queer persons with multiple intersecting identities, particularly if some of those identities might be marginalized within the context of the society in which they live. In Toronto, there has been discussions around relationships with police, the policing agencies, the Toronto Police Agency, Police Service, around queer persons of color, around trans persons. In London, England, one of the discourses that I'm looking at is the way in which some persons who are LGBT plus and also Muslim experience the Pride Parade and their understanding. I think when you're a marginalized person, and I am a marginalized person with several identities, there can be an assumption when you gather with other people that share that same marginalization. For instance, Black Americans in Chicago, there was sometimes the belief that we're all Black Americans, so we are all experiencing our identity in an identical manner, which was not the case. Some people were very poor, some people were living in abject poverty, and some people were middle class, and some people were wealthy. We had shared experiences because we were Black and in Chicago, but we had other identities as well. So it was always interesting when we came together how people understood their own identity and where that placed them in terms of their lived experiences, and how they experienced the identity of other Black Chicagoans, their other intersecting identities that might have differed from their own. So when I look at the discourses that have emerged out of Pride Toronto and that are continuing to emerge out of Pride London, I think continually about how we understand self, particularly as a marginalized person. How do we experience our marginalization? And then how do we understand people who share some of the similar marginalization, but have their own unique identities that may differ from oneself, and how those understandings of self in this space that is, in this case, Pride London, impacts how you reach out to others who you may share an identity with, how you don't reach out to them and why you don't reach out to them, or why you decide to reach out to them. I think all of those are very interesting questions, and I'm keen to explore them. I am keen to understand why people pull back. There's an article, and I've posted a series of articles for both around Pride Toronto and Pride London, in London, England. And there are some Muslims who are also LGBT plus who have decided not to participate in the Pride functions because they do not feel safe. They do not feel included. But the word safe for me, when I read these articles, what I hear is, you don't understand my marginalization. You don't understand the ways in particular and specific to me that I'm being marginalized. There's also issues around, in both prides, Toronto and London, around the ways in which some people feel the parades are less political these days. They've lost their political roots and are more tools for capitalism. So that's an interesting discussion to have as well, and I'll do that a little bit. But my main focus is to understand how we understand our identities, particularly when we meet in places and spaces for those that are marginalized. And then do we understand still, if we share an identity, we're all queer or we're all Black Americans, that still we carry simultaneously multiple identities that nuance the way in which we're queer, or nuance the way in which we are Black. And do we understand how our multiple intersecting identities influence how we experience life? Do we understand how our multiple and intersecting identities are experienced by others who share marginalization with us, but we may be viewed as not quite as marginalized as they are? So whenever I hear the word safe, I understand a sense of a desire to stay safe. Well, I think that's a human desire, but I understand this sense of a loss of safety, right? And so when I hear that word, and particularly when I read the article, I hear the word safe and safety, those words being used, but what I think it is in essence, you don't get the life I'm living. You don't get it. You don't respect the life I'm living. Because if you respected the life I'm living, you would understand. So I promised that this would be a, relatively speaking, I should have said relatively speaking, short podcast, because it's a preliminary one. I will follow up after the London Pride Parade. I want to see how the parade works out. I want to see the level of inclusion, and I want to see who feels safe and why they feel safe. I want to get a sense of that. So there are a series of questions I have, and I also need to wait for the parade to happen to find out and to get a confirmation after it happens. I will have a sense of who joined and who did not join, and I can then explore why. This is Debra V. Wilson. I am in Canada. It's the 6th of July 2018. It's Friday, and the time is now 1000 hours and 3 minutes, and that's GMT -6. Thank you.